Welcome you all to Trek Wars. Alright, so doing our calibrations of on-screen capabilities of starships and determining their power levels is something we do on this channel all the time, and we're constantly trying to get as much data as possible. And since you guys were able to help me out so much and give me some additional data, we're going to be adding some different data points to our Klingon ships to modify them to make them more accurate than what I had previously done. And so with that being said, thank you guys for all the additional information and the helping, and those who helped with this with the comment section of improving our data for the Klingons. Alright, so we're going to be looking at Star Trek The Next Generation Season 3, Episode 15, Yesterday's Enterprise. Now, if you remember that episode, this is the mirror universe where the Federation basically loses to the Klingon Empire, and they have to save the Enterprise C so it can go back in time and reset basically the space-time continuum to the correct universe. So analyzing the data we see here, we get an estimation for the shield power, and we get an unusually low hull strength based on the shield's collapse and the phasers are actually hitting the ship itself. Now, we've done a calculation, and we talked about this, and there is a little bit of data that was missed that you guys had found, and we'll bring that into light here in just a second. But we're going to watch that battle scene, and guys, let me know if you catch it. Okay, so what you're going to look at here is during the battle scene, you're going to see the Enterprise is going to fire phasers a few times, and then it's going to use one consistent phaser that is just directed at the ship, and it stays there longer than the other blast, and it's just a straight, prolonged beam. Now, what I did not catch and what you guys caught is that when the shields drop, it was going and hitting and had the continuous beam directly at the warp core. So it wasn't the damage that was done to the ship, per se, that caused it to explode. It was the fact that the phasers penetrated the armor system of the ship and directly hit the warp core, which caused a warp core breach and caused the whole ship to explode. Okay, so the K'Vort is a really large bird of prey. There's lots of different birds of prey. The K'Vort is based off the small Burrell bird of prey. Okay, so what I've decided to do is I have videos that are talking about armor levels that are going to be fixing some of the inconsistencies with my Federation starships because their armor level is not really correct, and I knew they're not correct, but I didn't have the data to fix them. So my Lost Era starships, my Excelsior class, isn't at the power level that it should be, and so all those things are going to be fixed in future videos here. But for right now, I just want you to know that because I fixed the Federation ships, I went back and started tweaking some of the Klingon ships that I knew were wrong, and you guys pointed out that were wrong, and we'll kind of fix them right here. Okay, so if you want to kind of give an idea of what I'm doing, is it's going to be the ship's mass is going to be times the armor. So I call it armor class on the little things that I've created. The little cards for the ships, and a bird of prey, a Burrell, has a class 24, and so the K'Vort is completely based off the design of the Burrell, and so I went ahead and did it as a class 24, and when I did that, the hull strength came up to 680,000. So the mass of 1,890,000 times 24, which is the class hull strength, is divided by 66.92, which is our constant. So when we're doing these formulas, you have to have a constant. So think of the 66.92 is the hull strength per point. And so that's why you're dividing it into that. And so all our ships are being recalibrated based on their hull strength. And I'm using some of the data from FASA to do this, but I will be honest with you, some of the FASA data is very wrong compared to what is seen on screen. And so if I have something that's on screen that is absolutely that's what it is, then I disregard FASA and go with what we have. So the shield strength is much weaker on the FASA version of the K'Vort, and I'm not accepting that because on screen proves that to be wrong. Now, the hull strength, we see the phaser blast, and it's something like 260,000 points of damage when the shields go down and the ship exploded. And like we talked about it, the reason for that is because it hit the reactor and exploded. So the ship's true value and actual hit point strength would be around 680,000. Okay, so let's look at the ship itself and the data that we have here. So nothing's really changed too much from our previous breakdowns, except for the hull strength. So the hull strength is 680,000 now, so it gives a defense of 2,160,000. That is putting it in the category that it belongs. So it's a battle cruiser. Before, the hull strength was just so pathetically low that it didn't really make sense, and you couldn't really consider this thing a cruiser based on what we were seeing there. With that being corrected, now remember, this is the mirror universe, and we do have another K'Vort, which is a more powerful version that is seen during TNG. It's the one that Worf and his brother were aboard, and we'll look at that one next. So when we look at the K'Vort, the one that we see get blown up by the Vor'cha class cruiser heavy disruptor, we know that the heavy disruptor we've calculated, and it can't go beyond 520,000. And so that leaves me a problem, because the previous K'Vort, I put a hull strength of 520,000 because that was the absolute max that I could do. And we'd seen it destroy the little bug ships that the Dominion have in one shot. And so that's where that calculation came from. But obviously that didn't really fit, and once again, 520,000 is pretty low, but I just went ahead and went with it. But now I have a calculation of armor class 30, and the reason I gave it armor class 30 is what I decided to do is I took the previous stats, the 520, and I thought, okay, if it's 520,000, what could we have done or seen that could raise it up? And people pointed out, well, hey, when the ship was hit, if its torpedoes were, armed and getting ready to fire, or were, armed and ready to shoot, once its shields went down, and as soon as you hit that bridge, it would cause an explosion of the torpedoes that were loaded. And the vessel carries 2 torpedoes. Each torpedo is 171,000. So that means that we could have the hull strength of 520, which is the blast from the Vor'cha class cruiser. But additionally, we're going to get 2 torpedoes that were loaded at 171,000 points of damage. So if we do that, and then we give the ship a class 30, it'll come around pretty similar to 850,000. And so I decided that makes a little more sense, and that we can take that logic with it and say, well, it's a possible scenario, and it can explain why the ship's hull strength should go up. So based on this probability, I've decided to go ahead and increase the hull strength to the max that I think it's possible to get, which is 850,000. That's going to give the ship an armor class rating of 30. Now, we'll talk more about this in later videos, but just understand armor class 30 is about the same as like a Constitution class or a Miranda class starship. So 40s and 50s is really what the Excelsiors are at, and some of the newer ones can be up to 60. So the most standard combat vessels that are made strictly for combat, they're heavy combat vessels, capital class, are in the 50 category. So 30 is more of like a smaller support vessel, and that's kind of how I feel the K'Vort is. I don't think the K'Vort is meant to take the place of the Vor'cha class or anything of that nature. Okay, so we're going to look at the Vor'cha class. We've got some additional data points added to the Vor'cha class. It's got an armor class of 50, so we've increased the hull slightly to 1,670,000. I didn't change the shields, so the full defense is 3,466,000. The ship is classed as an attack cruiser. It was made around 2357. It's a D90 is the classification. It's 481 meters. Its mass is 2,238,000. Okay. It's a little slow, so the warp speed is going to 8. That's basically what FASA is saying, and I went ahead and did that alteration. Now, FASA has different weapon systems, and I went ahead and added FASA's weapon systems to my calculations because mine were more broad, saying it had only 16 disruptors, and they were all KD-23s. Now, it's supposed to have 10 KD-34s. They're slightly better at 45,000 instead of 32,500. So class 15 And then our standard disruptors, KD-23s that we see on most starships that the Klingon Empire have, they're class 10. The class 10 is a description of telling you what VASA basically has their power output as, and then using our on-screen conversions. So some of them don't match. So one heavy disruptor, which is the KDC-18, is a class 65. The formulas don't match, but it is 520,000, so I left it because we see that on screen. Now, I did upgrade the torpedoes to what VASA has, which is a class 38, which is higher than my 171,000, which is 200,000, and I gave it the full volley of 8, which we've seen with some of the other ships. So overall, the attack value is 5,965,000. Not a huge increase, but a slight increase. All right, so one of the things I wanted to point out about the Vor'cha is some people, they want the Vor'cha to be like this behemoth of a starship and this monster. It's not. And it's not seen to be doing this thing or really to be a monster even on screen. Because remember, it took 2 K'Vorts to attack this thing, and they caught it off guard, and they're able basically to cripple the vessel pretty quickly. So it's got high shielding, definitely, but it's not like the Defiant, and it's not a Sovereign or anything of that nature. Remember, the ship's mass is very similar to an Excelsior-class starship. And Excelsior-class starships are heavily armed vessels that are combat vessels, right? They're old dreadnoughts. So this ship is, yes, it's a cruiser. It's a modern cruiser. But it's got what I would say dreadnought level firepower on a cruiser. So it's a glass cannon. So if you were to say that this is the dreadnought of the Klingon Empire, it would be pretty shitty. Now, if you keep it as just an attack cruiser and a cruiser, like what it is, then this ship becomes absolutely a monster. And it also explains why there are so many of them. Because the Klingon Empire has, I think, over 100 of these starships. They have a massive amount of them. And if they were, had an armor rating of what was said by VASA of 110, like they would be so ridiculously expensive. They'd be as expensive as building a Galaxy class. And I just don't feel the ship operates or ever seen to really take that much damage. Because the only time we've seen one of these things actually be blown up in the battle scene is when we see the 2 Negh'var ships ram it, and then it dies. And we know that a Galaxy class with no shields, okay, gets its ass kicked and then gets rammed and then it dies. So this thing can't really be that strong, seeing as that it took 2 hits from Negh'var fighters ramming it and it was dead. All right, so this is the old Klingon Negh'var class dreadnought. What I'm going to do is it's going to get a vamping just like our Vor'cha class and the K'Vorts did. I haven't got around to doing it because I want to be a little more, because we see a really intense battle scene between this and the Defiant, which is going to where my data is mostly going to go to, rather than what VASA is saying, because VASA honestly is making it like 10 times stronger than what it should be. So my opinion about it is I think that it's going to have the same hull strength armor classing as the 50 category. And this ship is the size of a Galaxy class. And what that's going to do is it's going to put it in the Galaxy class. It's going to put it higher than the Galaxy class. And I think that's where it should be at, because this thing can easily take on a Galaxy class, like no problem at all. Even though the weapon systems it has now, I will improve them, just like I did with the Vor'cha, but I got to break those down. I'm going to pull the weapon systems from VASA and then add them into my calibrations. All right, guys, so I just want to let you guys know I've not been making videos. I'm sure you've noticed it's been pretty slow lately. I had a severe injury, and it's limited my ability to make videos and stuff. So videos are going to be relatively slow coming to you guys for a while until I can get over my injuries. The next video that I was making before my injury was going to be about weapon systems and how they function, and power cells and recharge rates and things of these nature, about phaser emitters and phaser arrays and how they work. I will make that video probably in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be relatively slow with videos, and I apologize, guys, but unfortunately I was severely injured. And with that being said, I want to thank you guys for everything. And if you guys have any ideas about the modifications that I should be doing for the Negh'var, please make a comment. I'll read them and then I'll add them to my calculations of what you think. Thank you for watching Trek Wars. If you like this material, please subscribe and make a comment. And with that being said, victory is life.